Hey, what's up, champions? Welcome to Growth Mode. I am your host, Donnie Bovine. I'm the CEO and founder of Success Champions. Been a 20-year sales guy that got tired of making everybody else wealthy and decided to open up my own companies. I spent the last 3.5 years building 5 different businesses and learning everything about scaling and growing a business. Hanging out with me is my buddy, as always, Kevin Snow, the sales and automation tactician. This guy is the brilliance behind everything Success Champions. This dude makes everything works. Where I'm the pretty face out front, he's the weird, creepy guy behind the scenes. So, Kevin, this episode, what are we talking about?
Well, I think we need to talk about your definition of the word pretty. But what I want to talk about today is, as a entrepreneur, small business owner, we have to wear lots and lots of different hats throughout the course of a day or week, or even the lifetime of a business. How do you effectively switch those hats and keep on top of everything and maintain business momentum?
Yeah, I love that. I can tell you early on in my business, and as I think is kind of like a common rule for most people when they first start out, the answer to the question is how do you switch hats is poorly. Um, my story, a lot of people have heard it. I spent all my time being a sales guy, and then I decided to launch a business. And, literally trying to go from employee to business owner was such a massive mental leap that there was a lot to learn. And the reason it was so poorly on my end to switch hats early was because I thought a CEO was behind the scenes. I look back on the things I was doing as a CEO makes everything work, and isn't the guy out front. And then I learned very very quickly you got to be the guy out front if you're the guy to be the CEO, and then everything behind the scenes. So, but changing hats can be difficult to do if you're doing all the stuff. So I think the first thing that people need to recognize if you're inundated with doing all the different things, the operations, the sales, production, outreach, accounting, and you're doing everything, the first move you got to make is get that shit off your plate. And as quickly as you can, get that out to somebody else. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think one of the big issues to what you were saying about not understanding that the CEO is out front, not behind the scenes, is that when business owners come into or entrepreneurs start their business, they have this idea of what a CEO is, and they completely forget that they're the only person in their company.
Yeah.
And they don't have anyone else who's actually doing all the things that they think is supposed to be done by other people. And so they're sitting back planning and doing stuff. It's like, but who's doing your sales? Well, I don't know. Who's doing all these things? You have these really grandiose plans, but no one's actually executing. We talked about in our becoming a champion training the other day, the whole idea of going through the motions or going through action. And right. I think that is part of the issue with entrepreneurs not being able to switch hats is they don't understand what actions they need to be taking at what time.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny, and I love you brought up the motion versus action because I think that's been a eye-opening thing for me to totally wrap my head around. I've always said you're not doing anything if it's not producing results. And I just the definition of motion is doing things to delay failure. I just love that definition, right? Versus action is something that produces the results, and I love that thought process. But changing hats. I mean, probably the most difficult transition is being the guy or gal out front, and then being the person back doing all the stuff. And let me sum it up for you really quick, business owners. If you're listening or you're watching, is you're always going to be the number one salesperson. End of story. Nobody is ever going to outsell you in your own business, or if they do, there's a problem. And look, I mean, it comes down to if you can't sell, don't start a business. Because it's going to require a lot of conversations, a lot of different things, and sales is at the forefront. And sales doesn't solve every problem, but I'd rather have problems of too much money versus not enough money. Coming into the company and then trying to figure it out. So, but for me, I get mentally exhausted sometimes trying to switch all the hats, and Kevin gets to see it because we'll go from different meetings, and one moment we're talking about the magazine, one moment we're talking about the podcast, one moment we're talking about the networking groups or the consulting business, and sometimes I don't transition them well. Because business Donnie and home life Donnie have become such one person. I try and make it a smooth transition, but to switch gears, and Kevin's been there on a couple of meetings where I'm totally lost in what the conversation is, and then I'm like, all of a sudden, oh fuck, we're talking about the magazine now. Got it. Okay, makes sense. Let me get caught up now. Now I know where we're at. So it's an interesting thing to proactively switch in the moment. So not only with what you're working on, but what projects you're working on as well.
And I think with entrepreneurs that are wearing the production hat, fulfillment, sales, all this stuff, it's really easy for them to get sucked into the production side.
Stuck or sucked?
Sucked.
Okay.
Let me push my teeth back in.
That was like a stucked. I'm not sure
Yes.
what stucked is.
I've only had a cup of coffee. Leave me alone.
And you were probably up to 2:00 working on the stuff. So
About midnight before I passed out. Not bad. But they get sucked into the whole fulfillment piece and doing that and working on stuff and doing their thing. That's in their genius zone, that they completely forget about the other hats that they have to wear.
yeah.
And sometimes it isn't a fact that they don't transition well. It's sometimes the fact that they don't transition at all.
Well, I think that there's things we all geek out on. So I think oftentimes when we're not transitioning is because we're so in the moment, or we're avoiding the shit we should be doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's times, dude, that I love fucking around in Canva. I think it's a fun, great program. I love designing shit. And most times, I got no business there being and creating things other than I enjoy it. So there's times that I should probably be doing reach outs or trying to get on more podcasts and anything else, and Canva will pop up, and next thing you know, I'm doodling on some freaking social media graphic or something else. And it's not that particular activity is bad for the business. It's just not what I should be doing. And that's where the motion versus action really comes into play in switching hats, is that creating Canva feels good, right? I mean, I know you hate Canva. So for Kevin, it's creating in PowerPoint, or building automations and shit. But once you get into something that you really, really enjoy, it becomes a natural excuse to not do the things that you should be doing. So, and I'd highly recommend, if everybody hasn't read the book Atomic Habits, I highly recommend that book. It's been a phenomenal read, and we've been covering it for the last month in Becoming a Champion training as part of Success Champions Networking. But this is where the definition of motion versus action came into play. And, he talks about in there that if you're trying to do things that you don't want to do, you're most likely not going to do them unless you figure out how to make them fun. And I think that's a lot to do with switching hats is how do you make the activity you're avoiding or don't want to do actually something you freaking enjoy, and something you actually proactively want to be doing in your business. Because Kevin will tell you, put me on the back end of Entreport or some freaking program, I'm out. I don't want to learn all that shit.
Yeah, I remember when we were starting our business relationship, and I'd be like, "All right, so and here's how we can do this," and start walking you through steps. You'd be like, "Shut up!
Yep.
I don't care. I just want to know what it'll do."
Yeah. At the end of the day, I'm the guy that if you hand me a stack of papers and you're like, here's the contract, I'm going to skip most of it and just go to the last page, right? Because I want to know the end thing. I'll have somebody else look at all the details of it. But, and I think that's part of it. To switch hats, you've got to know specifically what hat you need to be wearing. Because you can even bring this into your personal life. As you walk through the door, you could be husband, wife, or, brother, sister, or, whatever your role is in life. You got to turn off some of that thought process. And yes, guys, you're never going to turn it off completely. You run a business. It's part of the game. Work-life balance is a myth. Go back and listen to that episode, and we talk about it, intimately. And I was trying to look and see what episode we talked about where work-life balance is a myth.
Episode 9.
I told Kevin that we got to get better at teaching you guys what episodes we're referencing in some of these. So you're going to hear us look at awkward moments of trying to figure that shit out. But that's the thing is, I love the idea of completely. I sound like fucking Porky Pig. I'm sure he's going to get canceled for some fucking reason, but Porky Pig. But you totally got to get transitioned from one thought process to another and be there when it comes to it. Like operational shit is like my worst thing to do. That's why I try and build such big teams, because I need people to do everything, and then unfortunately Kevin gets dumped on with all the stuff of trying to organize it at all. You should see him, in some of the meetings now. He's like, "All right, back on task. We need to get this done." Anybody who's been in a meeting with me, I'm just going to derail the whole fucking thing.
Hey, Kevin, I've made us a team. Now go manage it.
Yeah, that's pretty much what happens.
Make them actually do things.
See, that's how you know you got the right people playing with you. But I think really to switch hats, you've got to know specifically which hat you need to be wearing. You got to know specifically what actions you need to be taking, and then do it. So whether it's time blocking, whether it's doing things when you're at your best, I think you've got to be all in on that moment of time, and going with it to do the thing, and then figure out how to make it fun. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
there's go ahead.
I was going to say, when I got back from my deployment and I did the big pivot from speaking and training to consulting for Time on Target, I found myself, I was spending a ton of time on the building piece and like developing and designing and operational stuff, and not working on revenue things. And I actually had to, in my to-do list, I had to start splitting it out. I had a list for stuff that makes me money, stuff for marketing, and then other stuff. And I had to mentally prioritize the revenue things. Otherwise, I wasn't going to have a company.
For sure.
Or a house or anything, because, revenue is key. So I think part of it is helping people, or is for entrepreneurs to understand what is important at the moment they're in.
Yes.
Do I need to be making revenue right now? Do I need to be following up with these prospects, doing my reach outs, do that type of thing? Or do I need to be doing some fulfillment stuff? Or do I need to be working on marketing, a campaign for an event coming up? Understanding those priorities and how they fit in the balancing act that is being a business owner.
Or a firefighter.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and I think that's a quick, good point is to that is often as business owners, entrepreneurs, whatever the fuck you want to call them, we are firefighters. We're putting out, the biggest flames first. And I think that, you know, there needs to be a lot of preemptive thought process to prevent fires from happening so you're not squirreling out in the moment and putting on the wrong hats at the wrong times.
Yeah, it's so super easy as the sole person in a company to when a customer request comes in to say, "Oh, I'm just going to go fix this now," and completely stop what you're working on. And for me, I've found that especially if I'm in the middle of building out a campaign or trying to write content or doing something like that, it shouldn't take me 4 hours to post a blog, but it does when I'm answering every little email or doing all the firefighting real time as it comes in.
Right.
So, figuring out that process of how I manage it so it gets done in a timely manner, but it doesn't disrupt the rest of my hats has been key.
Yeah, I think we're going to do that as a whole episode on how do you actually manage your clients and still run a business. I think that would be a solid conversation. But, as always, guys, in this episode, I think it really boils down to know what hat you need to be wearing, prioritize, what things you need to be working on, be there when you have that hat on, and make it fun somehow. Do something that makes that moment of time something you enjoy. And as always, if you guys got any tips, value, anything out of this show, do us a favor and teach somebody else how to subscribe to the show. It would just mean everything to us. Keep rocking and rolling, kids. We'll see you next time.